Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Tomorrow, November 6th, 2012, will be Election Day in the United States, when the majority of Americans will cast their votes for president. I, for one, have already voted early. It should come no surprise to those who follow my videos that I supported and voted for former Governor Gary Johnson of New Mexico, now the Libertarian Party candidate for president. I think Gary Johnson is by far the best candidate in this race. I, of course, have been a supporter of Ron Paul during the time that Ron Paul was running for the Republican nomination. Now, I think Gary Johnson, out of the candidates that remain, is most certainly the liberty-friendliest candidate, the candidate who emphasizes the issues that need pressing resolution in this country. An end to wasteful and bloody foreign occupations, an end to the war on drugs, an end to the rampant and arbitrary and artificial fiat money creation of the Federal Reserve, and furthermore, a liberation of the economy. The ability of individuals, small business people, entrepreneurs to start their own businesses and to compete in a free and open marketplace that is not hamstrung by restrictions put in place by cronies who lobby the federal government for certain artificial privileges that they wouldn't have gotten on the free market. And of course, among the many other virtues of Gary Johnson's campaign is that he stands for civil liberties. He wishes to end the National Defense Authorization Act's indefinite detention provision, by which anyone on the president's say-so, essentially, could be imprisoned indefinitely, without trial, without charges, just because of some vague suspicion of some vague affiliation with terrorist activities, or even support for such activities, which is, of course, very subjective to define. He stands for internet freedom. He stands for a country in which freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press are not abridged. And he is extremely good on social issues, including issues where Ron Paul had to kind of tiptoe in order to avoid alienating parts of his base. Gary Johnson is an open supporter of same-sex marriage, for instance, where individuals would have rights to enter into certain contracts irrespective of their preferences in that realm, which I also strongly support. So, an excellent candidate all around, a person with a remarkable reputation as governor of New Mexico, a person who was able to receive the admiration of a broad range of constituents, and a person who vetoed an astounding number of bills, more than all of the other states' governors put together during his time in office, which is in itself a feat. It brings back memories of Andrew Jackson and Grover Cleveland and the few other presidents of that caliber who actually oversaw a liberalization of the economy and of personal freedoms during their times in office. He would make a great president. Now, realistically, who is going to win this election? I think the probabilities lie in favor of the hypothesis that Barack Obama is going to win a second term. And that's going to be a continuation of the status quo. People who voted for Obama in 2008, I thankfully was not among them, so I can't bear any responsibility for what has transpired, but those people were in many cases sincere idealists. They wanted hope and change, and an improvement over the many admittedly dismal policies and legacies of the Bush administration. But the term of Barack Obama, the first term of Barack Obama, could be considered, in essence, a third term of George W. Bush in terms of policies, in terms of what has actually changed. Well, the wasteful foreign interventions have continued. Indeed, Obama has escalated the war in Afghanistan, and he only wound down the war in Iraq because he couldn't continue it anymore. The Iraqi government wouldn't let him, and wouldn't let American troops continue to remain in the numbers in which they remained previously. Barack Obama's records on civil liberties, the war on drugs, immigration have been absolutely dismal and always in the direction of crushing liberty. Mitt Romney is no better. In some respects, he may even be worse. He may be worse in terms of military interventionism and wasteful military spending. He thinks Obama is not spending enough on the military. He thinks Obama's more gradual escalations of military spending would be tantamount to cuts. He wants to increase the share of the military's budget to 4% of the gross domestic product, which is historically unprecedented, and would require a massive increase in the deficit. And if Romney wants to pay for it without increasing the deficit, it would require a massive increase in taxation. So all of Romney's promises about cutting taxes or bringing about a fairer tax structure are empty words. Generally, anything Mitt Romney says is just a bunch of empty words, calculated with duplicity to please whatever the audience is in front of which he is speaking. Mitt Romney does not have an ounce of integrity. His reputation shows that he will flip-flop on any given issue, depending on what he perceives to be the political currents of the day. The man cannot be trusted. The man has run repeated advertisements, known to be false, demonstrated time and again by objective sources, including the alternative media, the mainstream media, bloggers, to be false, and he has persisted and persevered because his pollsters and his handlers believe that continuing to run these ads will win Romney favor among a demographic that perhaps doesn't know very much about the facts and doesn't care to check them out on their own. Well, this sort of person, if he wins, would normalize lying and deception in politics of a different sort than has been prevalent to date. Of course, politicians lie. Many of them lie about what they're going to do once elected. I think Barack Obama has had his fair share of deceptions with regard, for instance, to his approach to medical marijuana or immigration, in both of which cases he has actually increased prosecutions of alleged violations of federal law to historically unprecedented levels, despite his original promises to temper those kinds of enforcement activities. But Mitt Romney's kind of lying is more overt and more blatant. It's not lying about what he's going to do. It's outright misrepresentation, distortion, and falsification of the facts. It's no longer lying about himself, or even his opponent necessarily. It's lying about what is, more generally. For instance, Romney's recent statement that Jeep was closing its plants in Ohio in order to move them to China, which was prominently refuted by the president of Chrysler, the CEO of Chrysler, who essentially stated, no, Jeep is not doing that. Jeep is actually expanding everywhere, including the United States and China. And Romney continued to run those ads. So the man doesn't have an ounce of respect for objective reality. The only area that he respects is that which will win him political points. So the realm of momentary, ever-shifting, ever-nebulous public opinion. This is a very dangerous kind of person to have. This is a kind of person who should not be let anywhere near political power. And of course, if you look at his political record, it's pretty much identical to Barack Obama's in essence. If you look at the health insurance law he passed in Massachusetts, which had as its centerpiece a mandate to purchase health insurance for all individuals, and you compare it to the health insurance law that Barack Obama helped to promulgate, they were designed by the same economist, Jonathan Gruber of MIT, who really brings a bad name to all of us who are trained in economics. They really show that economics is a science that can be used for ill as well as for good. But if you look at policies, both support the auto bailouts and the bailouts of the financial system. Of course, Romney kept flip-flopping from supporting them to criticizing them to supporting them, etc. Both support an aggressive foreign policy. Both support the abusive treatment of civil liberties that we have had in this country. So both deserve to lose. In practice, one of them is probably going to win, but you should not be a part of the problem. The central thrust of the message that I want to convey to you today, whether or not you're a libertarian, whether or not you agree with all aspects of Gary Johnson's platform, I hope to encourage you to vote your conscience and to vote for a candidate that doesn't represent this heinous establishment. And if you're of a different persuasion, there are other candidates for you. Perhaps Jill Stein of the Green Party, Rocky Anderson of the Justice Party, Virgil Good of the Constitution Party. If you vote for any of them, you have my respect. We may disagree on certain issues. I certainly disagree with a lot of what they have to say. But I think they are all people of integrity. And they are all people who are genuinely outraged at the abuses of our freedoms that have been occurring under this bipartisan establishment. Remember, this two-party system is nowhere in the United States Constitution. It is not anywhere in the system of government that our founders designed. In fact, many of them warned against the dangers of this kind of hyper-partisan system precisely because it would limit choice. It would limit the scope of free and open discussion that would constructively result in improvements to the system, and would instead create these blocks, these factions, that if they're too powerful, too numerous in each faction, they would essentially dominate the system. James Madison wanted a kind of hyper-pluralistic society where there are so many distinct and small factions in a very large country that not one of them would have enough power to actually take over and determine the course of affairs in violation to how the people would individually wish to exercise their liberties. Now we have exactly what Madison feared, which is a monolithic establishment which kind of tries to polarize people through rhetoric, but the rhetoric is increasingly becoming much ado about nothing. The pettiness with which Barack Obama and Mitt Romney behaved during their debates is clear evidence of this. So much hot air wasted over trivialities, while the real issues, the violations of our civil liberties, the unsustainable fiscal situation, the arbitrary money creation and inflation that go on, the wasted lives, all of those issues go ignored at the debates of the major candidates. Now, the Free and Equal Foundation has done something excellent this time around, and that is it has sponsored its own debates, 2 debates among third-party candidates. The latest one was just this evening between Gary Johnson and Jill Stein. It was very refreshing to see candidates actually discuss issues that affect the well-being of Americans, rather than just issues that have become propagandized talking points to see which candidate can outdo the other rhetorically, while in substance both Obama and Romney are promising the same thing. So, vote your conscience. Don't care about who's going to win in this election, because it doesn't depend on you. What does depend on you is whether this heinous mindset of supporting the lesser of two evils is perpetuated. I hope you realize that the political establishment depends on enough people adhering to this mindset. Because the idea is if one side can portray the other side as a monster and itself as the lesser evil, then a kind of gradual ratcheting up of violations of our liberties is thereby facilitated. Because people vote for the lesser evil, they oftentimes will get the lesser evil, and the lesser evil will abuse them. But by voting for the lesser evil, they implicitly give their moral sanction for this abuse. They say, well, there's a certain degree of violation of my liberties that I'm going to put up with just because I'm so afraid of something greater, something even worse. And whether it's Obama that is the monster and Romney that is the annoying but lesser evil, or vice versa, this is going to be the practical effect, because whoever wins, according to this mentality, is going to know that he has some latitude to abuse your liberties. Well, this doesn't have to happen, because if every person voted his or her conscience, this whole two-party trap would fall apart. If every one of us went to the polls and decided that we're not going to figure into our calculations how other people are going to vote, we're just going to vote on the issues and on the candidates whom we consider to be closest to our own views about the direction in which this country ought to go. If that were to happen, then the outcomes would be considerably different. I would recommend an excellent website to you. It's called isidewith.com, and it asks its visitors a series of questions on a variety of issues, so you get to actually express your opinion in considerable detail. And after you've expressed your positions on the issues, this site shows you which candidates' views, including third-party candidates, are closest to your own. So if you think that you're closer to Obama or to Romney than to any other candidate, you might be surprised. And what else is surprising is if you look at the outcomes of millions of viewers' responses on that site, you will see that had all people voted their consciences and, of course, been informed about the issues and which candidates represent which positions, the electoral map would have been very different. In fact, the 2012 election would have been a contest not between Obama and Romney, but Obama and Gary Johnson. And I think that should follow logically from any perceptive observer's observations of the election. Who would support Mitt Romney genuinely? Who would genuinely be enthusiastic about Mitt Romney, except perhaps for Mitt Romney himself? And even then we'd have to think about which version of Mitt Romney is expressing those sentiments. Gary Johnson speaks to a lot of people who are indeed rightly appalled at the infringements of liberty that have taken place in this country. So why not give him your support? Why not cast your vote in a manner that reflects principle rather than seemingly pragmatic calculations that in fact fail every time because they fail to anticipate what these people will actually do in office, as well as a number of other contingencies. And furthermore, if Gary Johnson can get 5% of the vote, the playing field will change, because in the next election, the Libertarian Party will get ballot access on an equal playing field with the Republican and Democratic parties. And that's going to be a first step, but a very important step toward opening up the political system to multiple parties. Ultimately, what I would prefer is a hyper-pluralistic system where there are either so many different parties that no party controls this kind of commanding lead in either actually manipulating the institutions of electoral politics or controlling public opinion, or, and this may even be a better system with no parties at all, where each candidate runs as an individual and there are so many distinct views and preferences and positions that real reform is actually possible, because any time one is making a choice between two candidates, one is not choosing between two sides of a monolithic establishment. One is choosing among very distinct individuals, each of whom has a different vision of what is best for the advancement of individual liberty and prosperity and peace and improvement in this country. Wouldn't that be a wonderful system? Well, you can start contributing to that vision and stop being part of the problem in the way you cast your vote if you haven't done so already. And if you have, and if you've voted for a third-party candidate, then my thanks go out to you. As a person of principle, you have my congratulations and my respect. Thank you very much.